There was a warning this week on from Cushman and Wakefield, whoever they are. And the CEO told CNBC News on Friday that he believes the size of the remote workforce may double as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. It was going to double, treble, and quadruple anyway. That is what they're planning. And he said, if right now roughly 4.5% of the workforce is permanently at home, right now pre-COVID, we think that will double. But he said questions about productivity make it unlikely most people will work remotely. And he said in the early days we talked about the high productivity at home, but that's changing, he added. Now, Cushman and Wakefield CEO said that he believes that the size of the remote workforce may double. But then he added the vast majority will ultimately return to the office. Yeah, right. That's not happening anytime soon unless real actions from the top are taken to correct it. Next, we're going to Gotham, followed by Gotham Mark II. And Mr. Cuomo fights off calls this week to raise taxes in New York, which he fears may scare people away forever. No, you do, Mr. Cuomo. And he said on Tuesday that he speaks to the city's wealthiest residents every day. Notice he doesn't speak to the poverty-stricken. And he's begging them to come back, as many have fled for the Hamptons, upstate New York or Connecticut when the pandemic hit. And by May, at least 420,000 of the city's wealthiest residents had fled the city, and their exodus was cemented when riots and looting tore through the city in June. But now there are calls for higher taxes on the super wealthy to offset the projected $30 billion deficit New York is facing over the next 2 years. And Mr. Cuomo is resisting it, saying it will only drive the billionaires out of the city for good. What about the millionaires? What about the people with less than $100? And he's furious that according to him, there remains no national plan to tackle COVID-19, and says the ongoing catastrophe in other states is holding New York back. Clearly, he forgets their jackass attempts at tackling the COVID crisis, because Cuomo's response was to kill many of the elderly and then cover it all up. Did he not? And perhaps the new Life Force enforcement team should make Mr. Cuomo first for arrest for crimes against humanity. And crime is now up in New York City, a shocking 286% in robberies on the Upper East Side alone. Shootings have gone up and arrests have halved after the NYPD lost $1 billion from its budget in the wake of the BLM movement. So he's now begging the wealthy New Yorkers to return to the city and save it from economic ruin, while fighting off calls from other lawmakers to raise their taxes, which is a move he fears could permanently drive the 1% out of the city. Oh, the 1%. Now, what he was saying is many of these New York residents fled Manhattan in particular, and also Brooklyn. and they went to their second homes in the Hamptons or upstate, while others rented or bought new properties and abandoning their expensive city apartments. And now, with 6 months on, with no end to the national nightmare in sight, what is really happening is many are laying down permanent roots elsewhere outside of New York. And it said in the report, while New York has overcome its battle against the virus, the rest of the country, where lockdown rules have been far more relaxed, is seeing a resurgence. There they go again, blaming the rest of the country, whilst New York and its sister state of criminality, California, has done much to devastate this country, along with their dark script written plots coming out of Langley. And they said it's preventing New York City from resuming its normal activity because Cuomo fears a second spike in cases will happen if people from worse affected states travel in and infect residents again. But it was okay to infect and kill the elderly, it seems, Mr. Cuomo. So at a press conference this Monday, he said of the wealthiest residents who have long left the city, I literally talk to the people all day long who are in their Hamptons house, who also lived here or in the Hudson Valley house or in their Connecticut weekend house, and say, you've got to come back. When are you coming back? We'll go to get dinner. I'll buy you a drink. Come over. I'll cook. Seriously, who talks like that? What a jackass. But he said they're not coming back now, and you know what everyone else, they're thinking, if I stay there, I will pay lower income tax because they don't pay the New York City surcharge, he said. So he's asking people to come back and pay more taxes, which he said earlier he was trying to stop taxes. Jackasses. And then he made this claim: a single % of New York's population pays half of the state taxes, and yet they're the most mobile people on the globe, he said. This is the Ouroboros program in action at its finest. I warned, they were forcing people out a long time back. But in their desperation, they forgot to think ahead. A common theme. We warned the millionaires were going to get harvested, and they are. We warned they were turning certain portions of this country into greed-based enclaves, and they have. But then they forget if you force people out, there's less people to pay the taxes, you see, and the whole system collapses. Now, I must also reference at this point as a mild warning, as the source of this information is not always reliable. What if they are emptying New York and moving the key buildings in New York into Connecticut by October? Get ready for the now annual alt media scripts of October surprises coming. But if this is happening, what is planned for New York after the money merchants leave is the big question to ponder deeply on. Is an FF in the offering just prior to the election? The mass migration is not only happening in New York, but California continues to empty out as well. And Lake Toho has seen a record-breaking year of real estate sales, and the inventory of properties is at a shocking low amid the pandemic, as people working from home are now seeking refuge in the picturesque mountains. And local real estate agents in the Lake Toho and Reno area reveal home sales in the area are up 20% compared to July last year, and the number of active listings are down 25%, with properties whisked off the market in a matter of days. And the report is stating as people were leaving the Bay Area and leaving more populated cities and coming to areas like Lake Toho, which is traditionally a second home market, and buying homes there and working remotely. And this is according to the senior buyer's agent with the company called Redfin. And she revealed that homes in the area usually take between 30 and 120 days to sell, but now they're hitting the market and being snapped up in less than 30 days, often with many buyers expressing interest and handing in offers. Now, the Bay Area tech employees are part of the wave seeking greener pastures, as GoOgle, Facebook and Apple say employees won't be returning to the office until 2021, the summer. And remote learning in most schools means families can leave big cities for more outdoor space too. And the influx of demand in Toho, which typically draws locals looking for a second home, has seen this year's numbers absolutely skyrocket. So the home sales are up 20% in the Lake Tahoe and Reno area for the 4 weeks ending in July the 26th compared to last year. And the median sale price is up 7% to a median of 413,000, and the inventory of homes is at an historic low, with the number of actively listed homes now down 25% from last year. So the move out of the metropolitan areas and placing the masses in condensed cities, perhaps now we're seeing an end to it. You know, having travelled a bit around this country, I've probably been to about a third of the states. There are vast open spaces in every state that I've been in that could accommodate many small towns here and there, and allow the government to tear down most of the buildings of the bigger cities and convert it to a more green space to balance things out better. And it also reduces the so-called global warming issue that is confined to the bigger cities due to excess concrete and roads. Well, some of the spaces in the Four Corners states alone, you can drive 60 miles and not see a town. You know, I'm not talking about mass building everywhere. But why have you got masses of populations on coastal countries, coastal states, which is in danger of weather issues or flooding issues, when there's vast quantities of land all across this country just not used? You know, if you are planning for a real virus issue, one of the stipulations of that plan would be to have less people condensed in small spaces, would it not? Yes, I know, I'm talking common sense again. But people moving out of California, and whilst it may not please some of the residents in the nearby states, or so I've heard. And likewise, the people moving out of New York into Florida and other states is not going down too well. We need to move away from the coast, because this will then make insurance cheaper. There's going to be less damage to people's homes and more into the open space where we're not crammed in like sardines. We're still in California, and no surprise. This is a report that came in, and the guy by the name of Yu Meng, the Chinese-born Chief Investment Officer of California's Public Employees Retirement System Fund called CalPERS, who abruptly resigned from his position on Wednesday, and the resignation was effective immediately. Now, CalPERS investments in companies supplying China's military complex were already under scrutiny by the Trump administration, and major questions about Meng's allegiance to the United States were brought up by the Republican Jim Banks due to the fact that Meng's prior employer was the Chinese government. And since Meng has admitted to being part of the CCP 1000 Talents program, deeper questions got asked. And in the initial article, people wondered why Meng had resigned out of the blue and effective immediately, and it turns out that just 3 days earlier, on August the 2nd, Eve Smith at the Naked Capitalism blog posted a stunning, well-sourced expose detailing Meng's false filings on required financial disclosure forms, blatant self-dealing, and close ties to the highest level of the Chinese Communist Party government. Smith also reviewed the two statements of economic interest, Form 700, and Meng filed since returning to the United States from Beijing in early 2019, and the forms reveal Meng's extensive investments in Chinese companies, some of which CalPERS are also invested in. So the California people's pensions are invested in these Chinese companies. And continued income from Beijing of over $110,000 in 2019 alone. There was also a failure to disclose more than 20 assets disposed of during the year, and his stake in private equity firms that were making bank off of CalPERS investments in exchange for a crappy return. So he was making use of the Californian people's pension money. So he also listed more than $100,000 in salary from the Chinese government, State Administrator of Foreign Exchange for 2019, and he also started his position with CalPERS in January of 2019. So on his initial form, completed when Meng assumed his position, he claimed to hold stock or investment interest in 13 Chinese companies, including the Agricultural Bank of China, the Bank of China, China Construction Bank, China Petroleum and Chemical Corp, China Minsheng Bank, China Telecom, China Mobile, China Unicom, Hong Kong, Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, PetroChina, China Petroleum and Chemical, PetroChina Co. ADS, and iShares China High Cap. Now these holdings and the fact that retirement funds from California's state and local government workers are invested in these Chinese companies and also enriching their pension fund's chief investment officer, and the fact that Meng continue to draw a substantial salary from the CCP while managing taxpayer dollars evidences an extremely troubling connection between him and his former or current boss. And both articles point out that the association of CalPERS with the CCP is now under investigation by the Trump administration, which brings me to this person who wrote the article of certain speculation, and this is what he speculated. Let's begin with Dr. Charles Lieber of Harvard University Chemistry Department. Remember him. Dr. Lieber was arrested by federal authorities for allegedly not disclosing his financial relationship with China in conjunction with activities he was conducting for the laboratory in Wuhan. Oops. More recently, a series of articles about the FBI's interest in pursuing Chinese economic and espionage activities has surfaced to reveal it's a major focus of that agency's activities. And finally, the Trump administration has invoked Obama-era laws to promulgate a series of executive orders to deal with the coronavirus pandemic economic consequences. So one wonders whether Meng's resignation is all there is to the story. After all, he could hardly have done what he is allegedly to have done entirely or completely on his own. He had to have had help. So there's other dots connected to that story. But the question is, how deeply does that rabbit hole go? At this stage, we don't know. But what we do know is that Senator Dianne Feinstein's Chinese chauffeur of many years was also a communist Chinese spy. And also, let us not forget Biden and his son's involvement in strange deals with China. The plot thickens. But I need to make one thing clear here of references to the CCP, the Communist Chinese Communist Party. It is not directly related to the government per se, but it is the deep state in China, along with Rothschilds, dragon groups, particularly the Black Dragon, and the Black Sun involvement is behind all of this. And perhaps we got another confirm of what I said 5 or so years ago, that the clowns sold California, the whole state, to a Chinese consortium to complete their West Coast takeover. Time will tell.